Or I could say Woody Morrison.
Ihlgiigaa,
Laurel,
There you go. Just your name and ihlgiigaa. There you go. Well, it sounds like we're going to have a little competition here from their music, but what I wanted to do is, since he's videoing it, the whole idea of this class was really to make people who will participate in a ceremony called ilaay, dancing under the paddle, so they really know what it's all about. On Facebook, I shared a video that came from Shagluk, Alaska. I lived in Shagluk for about 8 years. My kid's mother was from there, and they had a culture camp this summer, and they're talking about the fish they got from the river, the pike, about moose that they managed to get, muskrat, some of the berries, and when you listen to them talking, you never hear the word sacred, you never hear the word creator, you never hear the word blessed or prayer, because everything is ceremony, and it's how you treat everything. Like with those moose, if the bones aren't eaten, I was told that they were put under a tree. That way no human could walk on them. And with muskrat and beaver, the bones would be put back in the water just to say thank you to the spirits of those animals. And if any of you saw the movie about The Edge of the Knife, there's a scene in there where people are cutting halibut. And one of the women tells the guy to take the bones and put them in the ocean. And he throws them on the beach. And ends up he and his, I guess that's his son, get caught in a storm. The boy drowns, and the man becomes Gagiit. He loses his humanity. Well, what he did was what they call na. That's in English they call taboo, but it really means that if you treat something in a bad way, in an insulting way, it'll come back on you. It's almost like you turned over a rock and you let something out and you can't put it back. You have to deal with it. So that's the way it is with our ceremonies. I was talking to an MP that called me for my vote. And I said, you're going to have to change the way you talk about environment. Oh, then start talking about fracking and oil pipeline. I said, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our food source, not just for us. And I told him about a situation where I was working in environmental protection, and there was a proposed hydroelectric project that was going to be, it would wipe out 150 spawning pink salmon. It's not much. And the project was to be paid for, amortized over 50 years. So I went to fisheries, Fish and Game, and asked them to give me a projection of what the biomass would be from those 150 spawners over a period of 50 years. It was enormous, huge. And so what it says is that those 150 salmon are not only going to be feeding the eagles and the bears as they go up their spawning grounds. The steelhead and trout will follow behind them and try to eat the eggs. There's a duck called a sawbill that'll stay in the stream there too and try to eat the eggs. And then when they die, the salmon die, the bears will pull the carcasses up on the bank. And so they feed on them, they decompose, but the nitrogen from the bodies of those salmon will be, if you can go up to 100 foot, 160 foot tall tree, and you'll find that nitrogen in the very tops of those trees. And so the streams are really made by the fish, because those plants won't grow there without those nutrients. And then when you get down to the intertidal zone, when the small ones are going out to sea, you have all those sea worms and all the other invertebrates are there in the intertidal zone. And as they go out to sea, there'll be birds will be feeding on these small ones. And as they grow, halibut will feed on them. Other salmon will maybe feed on them. Seals, sea lions, orca. All these things are feeding off these salmon. Then humans come in and they take a bunch of them. And so when you start looking at the whole thing, it's a whole web. It's a whole interconnected web. And so ceremony is how you treat all those things to keep them in balance. It isn't praying, you know, calling your ancestors to you and saying, I'm your grandson, whatever. So it was how they treated in that video, how they treated that moose, how they treated that muskrat, how they treat those fish and those plants and the berries and all those things. And so that's what we're trying to do when we talk about ceremony. We're a part of that weave of life. Gee, that singing is just a little bit discordant with our weave, but so when we even look at the whole beginning of this, a part of what we want to do here is addressing, we'll say, abuse of women. But the abuse is not only from the men, but from the women themselves. So we have to learn to stop abusing ourselves and each other. We don't need those stories anymore about woman being a vessel of sin that God man kicked out of heaven, and those sorts of things. And man is king. So we have to start looking again at each other as human and look at ourselves as being human. And the first requirement to be human is to be born of a woman. So you can have all your different mixes of how children are being parented, but they can only be brought into the world through a certain magic. And so in this ceremony, we talk about that first human. Was made from earth that was dampened by tears of sadness and tears of gladness. When aanuwaay discovered what was missing, those tears of sadness turned to tears of gladness and were falling into a handful of earth, dampened that earth. And when this aanuwaay discovered what was missing, there is nothing in all of this. Come on in. There's nothing in all of creation that can appreciate all of what is here. Nor is there anything in all of this that can express that appreciation. So this new one would be given those qualities. And notice that the hand was clenched, open, and that soil dampened with tears of sadness and tears of gladness held its shape. So the first human was molded from them. It was perfect. It was female. So the breath of life was put into it. Call it Ts'uswi. That's woman's power to pierce the heart, to kill or to cure. The problem was nothing is ever made with only one side, so to separate it into two parts, the second is male. And like I said, the first requirement for being human is to be born of a woman. So when she gives birth to that child, when that child cries, makes that first sound, signals it's now in harmony with the universe. And again, that's the woman's magic of harmony. And people don't realize that the universe is made up of song. It's all about music and harmony and things being in sync. Tonight's harvest moon, I think it is. It's going to be a very small moon, even if we probably won't see it, because at this particular time it's about the farthest away from the earth. And so it'll be a small harvest, I guess, I don't know. So when we start working on finishing up our own calendar, we want to look at that inner weave of life. Because if we don't start looking at it, we stop treating ourselves as human, and equally bad as we treat others as not human. So we'll not only be abusive to ourselves, but abusive to others around us. And so it's really important that whoever comes to join us in this ceremony, that they have that mental view of their place in all of everything, in all of, we'll say, the universe. I am the first one. I don't bring pain, anger, hate, but I'm carrying the seeds of humanity, the seeds of survival. I'm bringing hope and beauty to the world. And the men too also have to carry that same attitude of being I'm the first man. I'm not bringing my anger, my aggression. I'm bringing a soft mind. I look at other people's feelings and I consider them, and that's how I treat them. And my job is fairly simple in a way. My responsibility is to protect that one that's carrying the seeds of humanity, to provide for that one, to walk alongside that one, and never interfere in that one's search for its own special place in the universe. So it's not just going through a bunch of rituals and movements. It is just really internalizing this whole picture, this whole song. And so it's not like we can just go, like we're going to go out and recruit people to dance and people to sing just to do this thing. But it has to be much more than that. See, this is this wjaaw, this drum. This being right here, as far as I know, it was called Oolala. Anthropologists call it Oolala. But this one here, and the Greeks have one similar called Horus, Horus. But Horus has the body of a human, but the head of a, what's it called? That bird. Huh? No, it's no. They nest on Haida Historian. I can't think of it.
Eagle.
No, it's a small bird. It'll come back to me. So anyway, that's the one that brought healing. And the same with this one. This one that brought us healing. Oolala. But over time, people changed it to where the attributes of this shapeshifter were put into Raven. So now instead of us talking about this one that came from the stars, we talk about Raven. And these two frogs, they represent reincarnation. Almost the way of an eternal life, almost. Because used to be, ceremonies began when the frogs would freeze. They'll stay frozen from November until about March, February or March. And when they thaw and become animated, ceremony times ended. We're into the hunger time. This is when we start looking for this one, the aanuwaay. The aanuwaay would be the first salmon to come. And so there were ceremonies to greet them. But also they represent great knowledge, and we'll say wisdom, because they make such long journeys. And you gain knowledge from making long journeys. In the spring, when the young salmon the hatchlings come out of the fish nest. I saw a fish nest one time. My cousin Morrison and I went to a steelhead creek north of Heidelberg, and we would go up and spear them. We didn't have rods and stuff, so we just used spear. But we were walking along a sandbar, and I happened to kick some sand or something, and I turned and looked back, and there was like cellophane. It was real thin membrane, almost as thin as a spider web, just real thin. And in it were thousands of these little hatchlings, salmon, with yolk sac on their neck, and all of them were just vibrating, and it's almost like you could feel them humming, a humming sound. And I stood there watching them. Then I went back and I put the gravel back over them. And then I was told later that had I taken one and swallowed it, I would become a very wealthy person. Well, this is when the old ones had been teaching me, and I told them, I said, no. By not bothering them, I am truly a wealthy person, because that's all my relatives. And the more relatives you got, the more wealthy you are. And so that's the only time I've ever seen one of those. And I've never even heard people talk about them, those fish nests. I guess if you put the eggs in the gravel and just leave them in there, they'll probably wash away or something. But for some reason they stay in that sack. And then in the spring, there's a ceremony of calling somebody back from the dead. But that's not really what they're doing. There are different places along salmon streams we call ilaay. And my dad said it describes a round hole in the water. It's just a deep place where the water down in this deep place is very still. And he says it's very cold. So in the spring, well, in fall, when the salmon spawn and they die, they start drifting downstream. Not all of them are eaten, and some of them will drop down into that ilaay, and they decompose very slowly over the winter. In the spring, when the hatchlings are moving downstream, heading for the ocean, they're feeding off that yolk sac from their egg that they were hatched in, and when they deplete that, those will drop down into that ilaay, and there's sustenance there. And so this is where they gain sustenance. And it said that's where a woman's feelings are. in that place of sustenance. When a man knows that, he knows how to bring that woman's feelings up, to where two can become one, can become more. And so when these hatchlings are moving, there's this time in the springtime when that's happening, to where if there was somebody in the community that was deemed to be an essential part of the community, somebody that they had to have back, there was a ceremony in which, if it was a man, a nephew would dress in the likeness of that uncle. If it was a woman, then one of the daughters. And a daughter could be any one of a whole number of mothers, because they're all of the same crest. And anyway, they'd go on the north side of the river, or the stream. That's the side of healing. The north side, the color is black. That's a place where you can go to where the things that can hurt you can't see you. So it's called the comfort of darkness. And so, just as the sun is coming down, the window will say opens to the other side. And that's when the drums start. And there's the songs they got to sing. And this nephew or this daughter will sit down by the rocks and talk to these little ones and extol the virtues of this person's spirit that they want to come back. Of all the things this person has done, of all the people who are affected by that person. And so there's a complete picture of this person. And in the morning, as the sun is just going up, see, in Haida it doesn't come up, it goes up, because we're here and it's up there, so it's going up there, and then in the evening it doesn't go down, it's coming down. So in the morning, just as it starts to go up from the east in that yellow light, this is the unborn ones yet. This is the ones that are just coming to being. And so when that comes up, then the drums stop. And the ceremony is completed. 1 year from that ceremony, the first child born is said to have the spirit of that person that they called back. And it doesn't matter if this was a man, that spirit could return to a girl, with a girl when she's born. Because as each child is born, the child brings a reincarnated spirit of another person with him. And so children will watch very carefully. And at some point they would reveal the identity of that spirit. And this is how kids got their names, by their temperament, by their personality, and sometimes by the things they say. I have a grandson that when he was 5 years old, he asked my daughter, his mother, do people on different continents know there's other people around? And he's only 5 years old when he asked that question. So I gave him the name of my grandfather's uncle, ihlgiigaa. Ihlgiigaa has two meanings. One means dry talk. The other one is there's medicine in his words. So when names are given, we watch the person's personality, and then they're named like that. One woman on Facebook said that her name was wjaaw. And so I put on Facebook, there's a place about 40 miles northwest of Heidelberg, a big rock sticking out of the ocean off of Noise Island. It's called wjaaw. That's a sea lion's heart that is standing up, thrust above the water. So this person is one whose heart is standing up. And when she got her name, they asked, what name did she want? And she told that relative, whatever name you choose. And so that's the name she was that's how she's called. So the names aren't, people don't want to give them names, themselves names. When I was traveling in the Southwest Pacific, there was a guy from the prairies, I guess he called himself Drifting Eagle Feather. I guess it sounded good. So people give themselves all sorts of different kinds of names, but we say there are four things you can't do. You can't name yourself, you can't tickle yourself, you can't doctor yourself, and you can't lick your own elbow. My grandson did though. He could bend around, but I honest, I never tried. So this is all a part of what this ceremony is really all about, is really learning about who we are. We're human. Haida is a human. Haida. So when we refer to some other people, like say a Russian, listen, Haida. This is a human that speaks that language. Klagas, Haida. These are the Tlingit people, they speak a different language. So everybody's human. We're not saying that they're different from us, so we gotta hate them and all the rest of it. No, we're all human. We just have different names. Like the fingers of my hand. They're all different. Different sizes, different functions, but they're all connected to the same heart. And what I was saying too, about the sun, how the sun goes up and it comes down. In English, we're the center of the universe. So the sun comes up to me, and the sun goes down from me, rather than it comes up to where it brings light, life, warmth, and heat, and sustenance. So that's what the white color of the south represents, is when the sun is at its zenith. It's white hot, and life is coming out of the ground. So each of those things, the west, the color was red. That's the indefinite future, and it also can represent the end of our physical life. The word death means it's final, it's gone, it's ended. But for us, we never say goodbye, we say, who's done king song? Who's done king song? I'll see you again. It's not goodbye, meaning I'll never see you again. So it's a whole different view of ourselves in the world. Money represents personal power. The more money you get, the more personal power you have. You can start buying people and buying whatever. But wealth is responsibility to share. And wealth are really all your relatives, because you're all sharing a great deal in common. The one thing I left off is, I was told about it, but it was never really described to me. The star people. I know in Mass that there's a star house. And so this is my own view of what the star people look like. A star person. Because in our ceremony, the star woman will come. And she represents the day when anything is possible. This is when what they call slave could receive a heaven-born spouse. So this is the day when anything is possible. So that's why that's on there. I didn't do this. I was taking an art class with Mike Dangley, and I sketched it out. Some of it I just copied, and Mike took it, and Mike Dangley is the one that painted this drum. This is actually a tattoo design. That used to be the design on a Haida man, or that one. And these two here were tattooed on the forearms. And the frog, that's another eagle crest. So I don't know much about theirs. One of my teachers, Albert Nix, was of the frog clan. And also we hear people talking about different things. One of them, fire. Fire always has to be present when we're doing serious storytelling or seriously talking about our history. In a way, the fire is here. It's in these lights. Fire really represents a woman's essence. It's the thing that unifies everything. Fire's got to have oxygen, it's got to have fuel, ignition, and a place to contain it.
Could you say those again?
Huh?
Can you say those again, please?
Yeah, it's got to have oxygen, fuel, ignition, and a place to contain it. And when fire is used for a ceremony, you can't use the same wood for every ceremony, because the tree grows the closest to the sun. It's the tallest of all the beings. And so each one will draw energy, I guess we'll say, from the sun in a slightly different way. They grow differently. And so when those old men were talking to me, they talked about how you had to I guess you might say honor the hemlock. It'll generate heat on the coldest day. The fir will also generate heat, but not quite as much as the hemlock. And the spruce, well, the fir too will give black smoke, whereas the spruce, it'll burn a clean fire, and it's a gentle heat. It's not as hot as the other one, so you can use that one for cooking. Whereas with alder will also burn hot, but it'll also burn slowly to where you can use it for smoking fish. So each one of them has a different function. And so when you try to use the same wood for every ceremony, you're getting that energy from a different source. You might be wanting to do, say, a ceremony of burning food for the spirits, and you use cedar. Well, burning cedar is like throwing grease on a hot skittle. It starts popping. Two is that's what that is. Two is that red cedar. You put it on the fire and it'll pop and throw hot embers and start fires. So it's never used in a fire except as shavings to make for kindling, so that you can start the fire with that. And also, it says the spruce will tell you of its medicine. And there was one big spruce tree close to our house, that my dad cut a notch into it. And from time to time he'd go and he'd clean it, because there was always lots of pitch there. And the pitch was used for quite a number of different things. One of the things I saw it used for is I was at a small hospital or clinic in Tlawac, Alaska. And a person came in and been hit in the face with devil's club and had a whole bunch of those spines stuck in his eyelid. And the doctor was trying to figure out how to get him out. And this elderly Tlingit lady was sitting there. She said, I know how to do it, wait here. And she went home. She came back with some of that spruce pitch. And they heated it up to just enough to where it was sticky, not hot, and put it over that eyelid. And told him to keep his eye closed. And they waited until that solidified. Then when they peeled it off, they pulled all those devil club right out of the eyelid without causing any damage. One of my